Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Class. But the first thing we're going to talk about is Doctor Who. So in this episode, we have the Doctor, Bill, and Nardole, which he's only alone because he tried to stop the Doctor from leaving, because you could actually look in the Doctor's face, and the fact is that he was teaching a class and he was so obsessed with space and everything. It's because it's he gets that itch, because it's I think the Doctor just doesn't like staying in one spot for too long. He likes going out there on adventures and everything, and it's to have to be tied down. I mean, granted, the way Nardole kind of puts it, it's he's the one that made the decision to do this. He tied himself down by saying whatever he's in the vault is he's not supposed to let out and everything. It's for the sake of the world and everything, so he made a promise. But I guess it does seem like a lot of times the Doctor is very short-sighted in the deals he makes, not realizing what this means for me later on. So, but Nardole's only with them because he tried to remove a piece from the something from the TARDIS, and he's yep, the TARDIS won't work without this. And the Doctor's well, who told you that? He's well, you did. He's almost haha, you idiot, never trust me because I lie all the time. So basically they end up in space. It's almost like a space station of some sort. It's more of a mining space station, but basically it's a situation where it's a very very messed up system where it's basically air, you have to buy air. So in this place, there's suits that operate by themselves because the people that are inside of them are just meat sacks. It's the suit, for example, there's one guy that they found, he was dead, but he was standing up. It's not him standing up, it's his suit standing up even though he's dead, which Bill was kind of mortified by. She's can't we just lay him down or something? This is very disrespectful, whatever. But the thing is, this whole situation is it's like I said, it's messed up because in this future, air costs. Every breath you take will cost you. The fact of the matter is, there is no, surrounding air in the vicinity. And if there is, this thing will suck out that air because it's excess air, that's going to cause problems with, the whole system. If you're getting free air now, that means you're not paying for it. So we got to get rid of this excess air so that the only way you can get air is by buying it. It was who made that up in the first place? I'm sure that's something we'll probably never get an answer to, but I'm very curious who came up with that and why were people okay with that? How is that a business plan to be granted, I guess that supposed to just showed you the greed of people that, it get to the point, if someone can sell you air, they're going to try and sell you air. They're going to try and, not only monetize, but also monopolize on something like that not just a want, but rather a need, one of the three, not one of three, but one of the main necessities you need to live. So, because basically their suits are what actually acted as air. It's okay, you pay a certain amount and you get a certain amount of air. It's for instance, the suits that the Doctor, Bill, and Nardole got, they were kind of in repair. So basically they had enough air for, 2,500 breaths. And then Bill's kind of I'm almost shaking it up, and Nardole's yeah, but if you panic and stuff like that, you start breathing a lot more, and that just brings you a lot closer to death, and it start making Bill freak out and everything. So basically they're trying to survive the ship with this system called Vilma, because it's actually the voice of the actress that Nardole had a run-in with in the past. But nevertheless, they meet some of the other crew members, 4. I love the interaction between Bill and the Bluey Eyes. She's I've never, and he's oh great, we saved a race. Oh great, we just saved a racist, which for Bill is kind of wait, what? It's oh crap, I don't mean to be insensitive, I've never seen your people before. She's normally I'm on the other side of, the prejudice. And he's really? Why? She's really? You don't know? So I guess that's kind of the point of times changes. I guess it's supposed to put in perspective, humans will find, I guess it's not even just humans, people in general will find reasons to hate someone else. Even if they move on from one thing of hating someone for, they'll move on to hate another person because it's oh, you're different type of thing. So nevertheless, I also got to give it up to Nardole in this episode. He's so, I guess the word would be cheeky. He's always doing oh, the fact is the Doctor's oh, the door's making this choo 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 sound. He's oh, it's supposed to make the shoo 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 sound, not the. And he's are you really going to be doing this the entire time? Yeah, I'm going to keep doing that until you decide to go back home, get in the TARDIS and go back home. But basically this thing will kill people. Basically, it touches them, shocks them, and kills them because it basically activates something in the suit that basically kills each person. There's like 40 people on the ship. Out of the, obviously 4 of them are still alive. Granted, by the end of the episode, only 2 of them are alive, which sucks big time. But what was so interesting about how this operates, because it's like everyone's thinking like, oh man, the suits were hacked or something like that. Oh, we're being rescued or whatever later on. It's like, no, on both accounts. One, the suits were not hacked. The suits are actually doing this themselves because the suits are doing what they're supposed to do, because this whole thing is a business. There is, the way they put it, capitalism at its best, that basically these workers are not doing their job good enough. So it's like, okay, so let's get rid of the necessity and like kill the person inside. This way you're spending less money on like having to worry about giving them oxygen. It's like, oh, you're wasting oxygen on this no good worker. They're not even doing the job. We're losing money on the money we're wasting oxygen on them for just them not to do a good job because they're mining copper ore or whatever, but they haven't been getting enough or doing enough of a good job. So it's like, I won't kill you. Let the suits operate themselves, and then production will, or mining will, production kind of goes in and will go up, enough to kind of compensate for everything. So that's what this was all about. Like in some twisted form, it was this system doing what was kind of told to be like, oh, I'm sure it makes you wonder how much of it was like the system automated by itself of like, oh, this is what the programming is to do exactly, or is it like someone was there being like, I'm sure it started off as a human thing and then turned into a computer thing, or is it like a situation where it's like the computer took systems kind of in its own hand, like the whole Smile episode where the robots are like, oh, we're meant to make people happy and everything, so they kind of took things into, they interpreted things in their own way of like, oh, kind of stretching it far beyond what someone initially thought. Just because of how crappy people are and me being very pessimistic, I want to assume that it was definitely a human thing of like, yeah, we put all these safeguards in place that like, in case, someone's not doing enough good job, then cut them loose and basically kill them so that they can be useful. And even like the rescue ship wasn't actually a rescue ship. It was supposed to be like human, probably like not human, living replacements for the people. So, I mean, it's actually super sad. Just all for the sake of saving some money and trying to be very, what's the word? I'm blanking on it. Basically being effective. I can't think of the word right now. It's going to bother me so much. It's going to be after this recording. I'm going to end up like, oh, that's the word I meant to use. Productive? I think that's the word I was looking for. Even though I think I kind of said it before, maybe. Just nevertheless, being productive like to a certain like threshold, kind of meeting a certain quota and stuff like, it's just kind of a sad thing, especially on multiple occasions throughout the episode. It's like Bill has had it rough. She hasn't even been that long, hasn't been a companion that long as she's, I mean, granted, all other companions have always been near death, but it's like Bill like got it rough in this episode. She was near death twice. One, when her suit wouldn't operate because it's very malfunctional, and she ended up like her suit took her like helmet off and it wouldn't like operate properly, so the doctor put his helmet on her, which in turn like basically being going out into space like that, he ended up becoming blind and kind of basically had to deal with the whole rest of the episode blind. And there's one point later on that Bill's suit stops, but it's like, oh, we don't have enough time to save you. But the fact of the matter is, the doctor's like, I'm sorry, Bill, just know that you're not alone in this whole situation, that I will come back for you. Just, you're going to have to be alone for a while and you're going to be scared and everything. And Bill dies. I was like, man, that's okay. I was like, I know there has to be more to this, the way the doctor was saying and everything, but it's like, I don't see how you're going to get around this. Turns out basically her suit, because it was so malfunctioning, didn't have enough juice to basically kill her. So, I mean, still, that was a little too close for comfort. I mean, I think like, I could be wrong, but man, that's just like too close for comfort in both occasions. So, but the whole like giving her his helmet, I'm not too surprised. I figured that was going to be where the doctor would go. Like, he wouldn't ask anyone else but himself to do it. It's like, so sadly, it wasn't the case for everyone else. Like I said, her case was only like that because her suit was malfunctioned and it didn't have enough juice to actually kill her. Everyone else sadly was. Especially because one of the ladies, I don't know if that was the same dude at the end of the episode, which I don't know who that actor is, but he seems vaguely familiar. Also, same thing about the actress Pearl Mackie who plays Bill. I don't know what it is about her, but I feel like I've seen her before. I haven't, like, to be fair, I've never watched that many, like, British TV shows. Like, I probably can count on one hand the number of British TV shows I've seen. So, I don't know. I don't know whether she just has that face that seems familiar. Maybe I'm like misplacing her face in someone else I'm actually trying to think of, but I don't know. That or actually have. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look a little further into it and probably give you an update or something later on. But nevertheless, um, the thing I was bringing up is that lady at the beginning. She was like, "Oh, they're fixing the ship and everything," and she's like, "Oh yeah, like I want to have, when they're all said and done, I'm gonna have a baby. We're gonna have a baby." But the dude's calm was also he didn't hear the conversation and she died. I think that was the same dude and lady at the end of the episode because like they were face to face because obviously because the doctor made the whole situation so that like, hey, we can die, but if we die, basically goes boom the whole station, and that would basically cost you a lot of money. So leaving us alive is a lot cheaper than killing us right now. So kind of messing with the system, which later on, when they were all safe, the doctor helped take them to the main office of this operation, and ended up the two workers are like, yeah, we're going to complain to the main office, which he talks about it later on to Bill that basically 6 months later there was kind of like a change, and basically like that whole buying oxygen and crap. Not good. Because I mean, how do you spin that later on when you have to explain it to people? It's like, yeah, we kind of killed a lot of people for the sake, but we saved a lot of money. It's like people aren't going to appreciate it. I mean, granted, in that particular situation, it was most likely like, oh, we killed a lot of people. Let's keep that hush hush. Let's make everyone think everything's all good. Top brass at the top of a big conglomerate or organization or company will probably think like that. Dollar signs mean a lot more than lives, and sadly, in this definitely in this particular case, so that's super sad. So, but at the end of the episode, we do find out that the doctor is still blind. Like, even though Nardo tried to fix his eyes and everything, but the condition hasn't been reversed. Now, I did catch a glimpse of the next episode. I caught like one particular line, and it sounds like Nardo was like, "So you're not going to tell Bill you're going to keep this from her?" Which I guess for him, it's like. It's something Nardo kind of brought up in this episode because like Bill wanted to go to the doctor, but the doctor wouldn't accept her help because like Nardo was like, yeah, the doctor doesn't like being helped, and then like maybe in his mind he's like, I'm not going to ask for anyone for help because the fact is that I can do this, just to like too much pride, but at the same time it's just like. I don't know. It's like I'm supposed to be the doctor, and how can I be helpless? I mean, because that was the thing about this episode too. He was like the odds were stacked against him in ways I feel like they're not always like. The odds are stacked against him, but not to this degree. Like, he didn't have the TARDIS. His sonic screwdriver got messed up, which I'm wondering is he going to get a new one. I mean, obviously probably got a new one and everything. But nevertheless, plus he was blind at that point in time too, so I don't know. To me, this sets up a very interesting thing, because I think with his eyes damaged like that, even something on the TARDIS can't fix it, so... I mean, I'm sure there might be other means, but the go-to means in my head is like regeneration, which obviously Bill doesn't know that much about. But to me, that seems like that'd be the only way to fix his eyes, because technically they wouldn't be his eyes anymore. Because, but I'm sure for the doctor, regeneration is the last thing on his mind, because regenerating would mean technically him dying. And I think I've kind of elaborated on that before. It's like every time a doctor regenerates, it's technically like he dies. At least that version of who he is died. Like they all exist in some shape or form there. They're all the same person, but at the same time, a completely different person. Like, who they are at their core. I mean, even that's kind of like debatable, because it's like, even at their core, it seems like the doctor's very different. I mean, I guess like, the different versions of him some are more willing to hide who they really are, and some are a lot more open. Like the current doctor's a little bit more open to like say what's on his mind and just see how he feels and kind of do what he wants to. The other doctors were a little more, I don't know what, I don't want to use the word heroic, but it seems like they were more forthright by being like, oh, I'm a hero to save the day, which isn't what the doctor's all about. Even though it might seem like that on some occasions, which is just, he said something very interesting in this episode that was like, basically like, if you want to know what the universe is really like, respond to a distress call. That's because that way you'll see the universe in its truest form. Like when someone's in there, I guess in my mind, interpret that as like, when you see how someone reacts when they're in trouble and in need, how they react will determine, like, that's their truest form. Like, I guess if someone's like so distressed and need help that they're willing to cast aside and push other people to be like, oh, help me, but both someone else, that's very telling. But it also works in reverse of like, depending on what you do also tells a lot about you. Like in this particular situation, if you don't help these people, then what does that mean for us? I mean, that's the reason why Bill even wanted to stay in the first place, because the doctor was like, yeah, there's like 4 people here who need to survive. We need to help them. So overall, just a very good episode, and I'm very interested to see like what goes down in the next episode. still wanting to know what is behind that vault and what is so dangerous. What is this deal he made, this proposition to like stay on Earth and protect it, and why would he make that deal? Like, is it because he had no choice, or did he really just not think about it in the long run, or is it because he has future knowledge? There's this really quickly. There was a moment when Bill was getting shocked as obviously being quote unquote killed. That the first thing that kind of flowed in her mind, I guess, is because it's just like she was scared, obviously, but it was her mom, so makes you wonder if that kind of means something. We'll just kind of have to see. So like I said, I've brought up before like my thoughts on the whole mom situation. Like obviously he took photos of her, and obviously Bill got those at the beginning of the season, which I think, like I brought up before really quickly, is that's obviously the doctor from later on in the season going back in time and dropping them off to Bill before she started journeying with him and everything. So I mean we'll just kind of leave it at that. Let's leave it at speculation. So like I said, wait till we see what the next episode, I mean obviously as well as the rest of the season takes us. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of Class, a very, very good episode where obviously we pick up where last week's episode left off with Ram and April in the Shadowkin's world, also known as the Underneath. It's literally called the Underneath because it's underneath the universe. Because April kind of explains to Ram what we kind of learned last episode, that basically the Shadowkin have a big grudge against the universe because it's like, oh, we're kind of the darkness that the universe is kind of hiding. It's like, oh, we don't want to admit that you exist, so we buried you deep underground and just try to pretend like, in fact, you don't exist. So it's like, that's why they have such a stick up their butts about this whole situation, why they kind of hate everything and everybody, and why, like, taking Erodia, for example, like, wipe them all out and everything. But, for April, she figured, like, part of her kind of figured this was a suicide mission. I think it's more so like the Shadow King's heart is kind of affecting her. Obviously, he makes her very more aggressive and, like, not necessarily her normal self. I mean, arguably, you could also be like, maybe the Shadow King in her heart is kind of representing the darkness that's in her heart that he's kind of driving more to the surface. So maybe you could honestly say that maybe this is who, I mean, if you want to be pessimistic, you could think like, oh yeah, that's April at her truest form. That's who she really is, who she tries not to be, or something like that. But nevertheless, she's deciding to take on the Shadow King to a duel, because it's like, this is the only way to fix everything, especially when considered the fact is, like, it also brings up an interesting thing that when the Shadow King, if he loses the battle, that the Shadow King position goes to April, so she'll be the Shadow, Queen in this particular case. I don't know, I wasn't expecting April to actually win, and the reason for that is because I was like, there's no way they're going to make one of the main characters have access to that much power. I mean, granted, later on in an episode, they kind of retract that a little bit, but even for that one moment, she was like king of an entire species. That was incredible. I figured they were going to make that situation like end in a draw, or the fact of the matter is she gets called back beforehand to kind of help with the whole, situation that's going on Earth. Because basically the petals are kind of going wild. And it seems that, I think her name is Dorothy, I could be remembering that wrong, I totally forgot, but the governor's lady, she ends up bringing up the fact is, yeah, we can get rid of these flower things. Best option for that is, like, I mean, obviously the way they're spreading like wildfire, eventually gets to the point that, because she brought it up before, like, all these things will be big enough to actually, there'll be so many of them they can actually consume humans, which we see at least 2 people getting eaten by these things, to the point their flesh is being eaten off their faces, which sucks big time. But it's like, she's like, the only thing that could stop them is, the Cabinet of Souls, which in part shows you how much knowledge they have. And it's like, how do you have access to so much knowledge? Granted, and I also found out the people I was thinking of last episode, the group, I was like, oh yeah, who's that organization that the Doctor's got connections to that kind of tries to keep peace on Earth between aliens? They know all about that. It's like, the name is UNIT. I guess because it's such a disconnected thing, because I've referenced it before, but it's like, I guess Torchwood doesn't play any part in it. I mean, because technically, I don't think Torchwood technically exists anymore. Like, obviously, Jack and the others kind of exist to a certain extent, especially, obviously, I won't spoil it for anyone that never saw how Torchwood ended up. There's also always the thought, like, oh, they would want Torchwood to come back, but it just, ever since, it never became a thing. But, like, because obviously, the last time we left off with Torchwood, they were in America, so that's all I gotta say about that. But nevertheless, I was wondering, like, shouldn't that still be a thing? But they haven't been like a full-blown organization, a group. I mean, that was more like I think, if I'm correct, I think that was kind of more of that wasn't a government-orientated organization, I don't think, Torchwood. I think that was kind of like a secret like group of a few people, because I was like, after season 2, it was no longer just that small group, because that small group got even small. I'm going off on a tangent, so I do apologize. So, nevertheless, Unit is kind of who I was thinking of. But it's like, how do you have access to so much knowledge? You know who Charlie is, you know who Quill is, you know what the Cabinet of Soul is and what it means. And so it turns into a conversation where obviously, like, Quill is super pissed, because for her, it's like, you've had a weapon. The weapon that could kill the Shadowkin in any moment. The people that killed our people, which Charlie brings up, the fact is, you're a terrorist. You killed my people too. She's like, only because I, like, in a sense of like, we were slaves. She's like, I fought because I wanted to get, give my people a better chance, a better, like, status and stuff like that. Which Charlie's still kind of like, that doesn't justify what you did. Like I brought up last episode, like, Tanya brought it up, like, you don't need to treat Quill like that. But the fact of the matter is, and Charlie's like, you don't know what she's done. It's like, it's a very debatable situation. It's like, yeah, from an outside perspective, it's easy to be like, oh, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. But at the same time, it's like, in their world, in their, amongst their people, it's like, that's the way they handle things. But at the same time, it's like, also, like, she is a criminal. So it's not like, he's like, I'm not using the word slave, I'm using the word prisoner. You're in trouble because of what you've done. But it's like, the fact of the matter is, she is a slave because she doesn't have her own will, it's, for some people it's a technicality, other people it's just pure black and white, because it's like, depending on who you look at it from Quill's perspective, it's very black and white. If you look at it from Charlie's perspective, it is black and white as well, but a different shade of black and white, I guess. I don't know. Basically, the governor lady, for now I'll call her Dorothy, I think that was her name, I don't remember. She wants him to use the Cabinet of Souls on these things. Which Charlie's like, no. And then he has Quill being like, oh yeah, use the weapon to get rid of the Shadowkin. This is like your best opportunity to do it. But it's like, wait, what are you going to do? If you use it on a Shadowkin, that means you wipe them all out. But there's still this threat right here that has to be dealt with on Earth. That means you'd be sacrificing everyone on Earth. But the fact of the matter is, either way he goes, he's screwed. Because if he uses the weapon, that means he loses all the souls of his people. Because for him, it's like, that meant casting him aside. Because even if he never uses the weapon, because in the legend, obviously brought up last episode, that once you can basically make the souls of the Rhodian inhabit the souls and kind of erase the souls of other people and kind of inhabit their body and basically be born again. So, but the question is, are you willing to do that to another race to ensure that your race survived? Charlie, at the end of the day, he even says to himself, like, he didn't know what he was going to do. And I didn't know what he was going to do. I was hoping he wasn't going to do the whole, go with what Quill said. I mean, more so than anything, I think he was not going to do what Quill said just to spite her, because it's like, he wouldn't agree with her anyway. But at the same time, it's like a situation of like, what she was saying didn't mean something. It's like, these are the people who killed your people, your family, everyone that meant something to you, all your people. As a prince, as a royal member of the family, you have a duty to be a hero, to save, get revenge, which I'm sure on Charlie, from some level, like, wanting to be a hero probably spoke to him, because it's like, he wanted to probably do something for his people, and it's like, maybe this would be the best option. But once again, doing this would mean taking their lives away too, especially when you consider the whole situation is Dorothy's actually threatening him with the gun, and then she turns and threatens Mateo just to kind of, force his hand. And it's like, that's a very difficult decision to make. I mean, like I said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So, luckily he didn't have to make that decision, because April did win. But kind of going alongside that storyline was a very interesting thing. I appreciate the fact is that the people that went in to rush and save her, obviously Ram's dad went to go get Ram, but also it was April's dad that went in, and her mom's like, well, if you're gonna go, then just go in and then. Which had a whole conversation of like Ram's dad and April's mom and dad having a whole conversation like, oh, this wouldn't have happened if your child hadn't gotten in my child's life. Oh, my child was fine until your child. And like Tanya's like, dude, April's like super brave and smart, and she's like the kindest person ever. And Ram, the fact of the matter is, he saw his girlfriend get murdered in front of him, and he could have easily pushed himself away from the world. He kind of did, but he's back and he's choosing to live. So it's like, these are two of the most kindest people. It's like, they didn't, like, nothing bad happened from them being in his life. I mean, in fact, you could argue like something good happened. I really quickly will bring up the conversation of like Ram's like, April, and she's like, don't say it. He's like, what? He's like, don't say I love you. He's like, what? I wasn't going to. She's like, yeah, you were. I know you were. He's like, but we've only known each other for like a month. And she's like, I know you were going to say it because I was going to say it, like, even though we've known each other for a month and everything. she's like basically like, oh, you're not the typical jock dude. You're a very caring and kind person. You don't sleep around. He's like, well, I kind of sleep around. She's like, yeah, you're a very nice person. And because of that, I'm going to ignore what you just said, that previous statement. So me, I still can't interpret whether he was actually serious. Because to me, on his face, it looked like, really, I really wasn't going to say I love you. I really wasn't. You're just kind of jumping the gun and making this super awkward and everything. I mean, he moved past it. So maybe on some level he was, or maybe like everything kind of happening made him go like, oh, maybe I do. I don't know. Like, they haven't even been dating for long. They've like I said, they've only known each other for maybe a month. They've only started dating like last episode. So it's still, that's just an interesting conversation to have. But what I thought was kind of interesting was what April's dad said to her. It's like, hey, don't, like, I'm a screw up. I messed up a lot in my life. The fact of the matter is, like, you know, I wasn't trying to hurt you and your mom, but the fact of the matter is I had blinders on. I was so selfish. I was so focused on hurting myself. I didn't realize that I'd be hurting everyone else around me. It's just because, like, I just zeroed in on myself. And it's not necessarily saying April was doing this. To a certain extent, she kind of was, because, like, she's kind of letting her anger and her need for vengeance to, like, I was like, oh, if I kill the Shadow King, I stop all this. Even if I die or whatever, the fact of the matter is, it's fine as long as I stop all the Shadow King from attacking Earth, which her dad has to be like, you're not that type of person. She's like, you don't know me, which he's like, the fact of the matter is, I do. Because the fact of the matter is, what did you do? What's one of the first things you did when you used your powers, got your powers? I mean, technically, the first thing she did was kind of threaten your life, because technically, but honestly, she healed her mom's legs. And it's like, that shows what kind of person you are. Because if you sit here and try to if you kill the Shadow King, that will change who you are. That's not who you are. You're basically, like, once again, it's like, before I brought it up, it's like, maybe, just maybe, that's how April really is on the inside. But I'd like to believe that, you know, I mean, and that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. And, like, every person has that bit of darkness in their heart. The question is what you decide to do with it. Do you embrace it and just get lost and succumb to it? Or do you face it, stand up, and learn to control it? And, you know, that's kind of what April does. Like, she kind of, you know, she kind of lets her kindness outshine any darkness that may be in her heart. So maybe it's like that, or maybe she just naturally is kind and she was fighting back the darkness that was brought about by the Shadow King's heart. Or maybe, once again, it was her own darkness. Hard to really say, but I mean, I'm smack down in the middle. I'm not going to pretend like I could go either way on that, you know. So luckily, April didn't kill him. I mean, because killing him would have meant killing herself. But once again, it'd be all worth it if it meant stopping him from going to Earth and killing anyone that might be important to her and everything. So she did become Queen of the Shadow Kin. I did love the conversation when it was all said and done. Like, April's mom was like, oh, we're going to need to talk. And then Ram's dad is like, yeah, we're going to need to talk too. And Tanya's like, man, I'm glad my mom's not here. It's like, you guys have to talk to your parents about this. I don't. I get to feign ignorance to my mom about all this. So, which you got to give it up to April being kind of a badass and everything. It's like, she cuts open the portal. It's like, yo, you know what you want, king? I don't know what actual noun she actually used. Did she say king or queen? I mean, Tanya was like, yeah, you're like a super badass queen, but it's like, I don't remember, but it's like, you know what I want. And the Shadow King swept out and, like, devoured all of the plants, which in fact led to her kind of saving the world. It's like, you guys got it underneath your belts. Now you're saving a town, you're saving a school, and now you're saving the world. So it shows you just how pretty awesome they are. I even love Ram kind of making a joke. It's like, man, Charlie would be so pissed if he found out just how, like, that you're a higher position than him now, him being a prince and her being a queen. Like I said, like, she brings up the fact is that when it was all said and done, because the Shadow King, I guess just to make sure that she couldn't use her powers, his power, take advantage of his powers, and like what was kind of drawing them and bringing them, keeping them connected, that anchor, he removes it from himself so she can't tap into those powers. So, I mean, she technically won, so it's still debatable whether, I mean, I think she said something about it, but I didn't quite catch it, whether or not she's still the Shadow Queen or not. Like, I mean, she still won, so I'm sure she still holds the position, but I'm sure now that she doesn't have the power, the Shadow Kin are, like, less likely to listen to her. I mean, granted, she did, like, tell them to go through the portal, and like when they were leaving, she told them to destroy that entrance so they couldn't find their way back, because that was the whole point of the anchor, because they don't know exactly how to get to Earth. So basically they have to That's what the whole anchor situation was about, kind of trying to locate April, and so they can pinpoint April and just go there. So, but now that that's destroyed, that's no longer possible. Plus, the anchor's going too. So, still connected, but what April can't tap into her powers, which I'm sad about because I was so hoping, I was like, oh, please tell me April gets to keep those powers for the rest of the season. Nope, sadly not. So. But since I kind of quickly moved over it, but that takes a lot of moxie to do what Ram's dad and April's dad did, going through the portals, because Ram's dad is like, yeah, he knows about all this, but now it's like he's like telling Ram, is like, I want you to tell me everything. Like if there's an alien attack that might threaten the world, I need you to tell me everything. I'm in the know now, so I need you to tell me everything. You're my son, because if he didn't know, if Tanya hadn't gone to him, it's like he would have never known what happened to Ram, because Ram, he died in another dimension, rather another, he died on another planet or something like that, and never fully understand what happened to him and everything. So, but luckily, because of April's actions, Charlie didn't have to use the Cabinet of Souls like either one of them wanted him to. He puts it back, which you still have Quill being like, no, do this, get revenge for her people. Because for her, it's like, because she's in the exact same situation as Charlie. She lost all of her people too. It's like, yeah, me and you, we don't see eye to eye, but this is one thing where it's like, we want revenge. Like, we want to pay them back. But at the same time, it's like, Mateo kind of puts it perfectly. It's like, if you do this makes you no better than the Shadowkin. Like, they massacred all your people. Like, if you do this, you'll just genocide them all too. Like, it's kind of the point he was trying to make. So, I did love what, like I said, I'll just refer to as Dorothy said. She's like, the fact is, Quill's mad, but no, she'll get over it. And Charlie say, yeah, you pointed a gun at me. She's like, you'll get over it. But also, like, what's interesting is the conversation she ended up having with Quill. She's like, yeah, we kind of figured this was going to happen. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, there's like a 66% chance that April was going to win. But there was like a 70% chance that you were going to use the cabinet for your own reason, because even she admitted during the conversation with Charlie being like, oh yeah, we kind of figured that Quill might betray us and kind of use it for our own means. And Quill's like, wait, what? Which is like, how do you have it down to such an extent? Like, even she's like, she even at one point is like, oh, I see it. So it's like, what are you? Are you regular? Because even Quill was like, are you robots? And they're like, oh, for goodness sake, no. So it's like, are you humans? You aliens? Are you humans who are tapped into something powerful? What is it? Like, what is this whole governor situation all about? Like, because the fact of the matter is, they knew the possibility of how things were going to go out. They weren't 100% sure, because even like Dorothy herself is like, the whole like Quill situation of like Quill betraying them and kind of doing her own thing with it. It's like, yeah, I kind of figured, like, they say 70%. I was like more sure it was going to be closer to like 90%. But obviously, I'm a lady. They weren't going to really listen to me about it. So, but nevertheless, because Quill did kind of keep up her end of the bargain, even though it wasn't the way they wanted to, the petals were dealt with. So they are willing. It's like, oh, step by, tomorrow or whatever, and we'll kind of help you with this whole implant situation. So it's just setting up a very interesting situation, because it's like, what does this mean going forward? Because like I brought it up before, it's like, can you trust Quill if she isn't under Charlie's control? The fact of the matter is, if she's not under Charlie's control, that means she's going to be less likely to want to protect him or his friends or help them out with this whole situation. Like, at the end, she'll just be more concerned about doing what's necessary for her. I mean, granted, this group won't let her probably do that. It's like, I mean, who's to say this group doesn't mess with it, so that's like, oh, you don't have to do what Charlie says anymore, but you have to do what we say, just, evil plot twist. Even though they're good, like a quote-unquote possibly good organization, they could still end up doing crappy things for the greater good or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it's hard to say. Like, obviously, Charlie, Tanya, Ram, and April are kind of their own thing. Obviously, Quill included, but and this other group is its own thing. Because even then, it was like, because even Quill asked, it's like, you knew about the whole Shadowkin and the teacher with the dragon tattoo and everything. It's like, why didn't you interfere then? It's like, oh, we knew that you'd be able to handle it and everything. But this is a situation with these flower petals. It's a situation that's kind of escalated pretty quickly, and it can end up, humans being devoured and just the world kind of being destroyed and everything. So this is a situation where we need to step in. So I don't know. It's going to be... I'm very interested to see what will happen. Like, if Quill is able to get this out, like, what does that mean for them? Because a big reason why she doesn't really like the group anyway is because it's like, she feels like an outsider. Because even with Charlie, even though he's lost all his people, he still has friends. He has his boyfriend Mateo, he has Tanya, he has Ram, and he has April. He's not necessarily all that close to them and everything, but still, like, there's somebody. And who does Quill have? She has her master, Charlie, kind of barking orders at her, forced to protect him because if he dies, it means her dying too. So, not something that a good friendship will be fostered on. But for Charlie, it's like, I'm not trying to be friends with you. You hurt and killed a lot of people in your day. No matter what your reasons were, you still did. You're a bad person in his eyes, which, once again, like Tanya brought it up last episode, she doesn't look at it like that. It's like, Quill's a different person. You two aren't on your planet anymore. This is our planet now. And it's like, like it's a very complicated situation. And also, things between April and her dad. Like, she's slightly forgiving her dad, but obviously it's like a situation where it's like, you still messed up big time. You were out of our lives for 8 years. So it's like, don't think you can just be welcomed in our lives. We'll contact you. Don't come to us. We will contact you if we find it in ourselves to forgive you. Just give us time. And for him, he's like, that might not ever happen. It's just like, maybe it won't, maybe it will, maybe it won't, And so it's like, you gave up the choice of ever being, you gave up ever having that option the moment you did what you did. So he is kind of giving them their distance. So, because in this episode, I mean, he's able to see April. He's seen how strong she is. In fact, how strong she is. And the fact is, of just what she was able to do, it just showed you the strength of her will. Like, once again, it's like, hey, life, was crappy. You took that crap and you just persevered. And so, it's like, it's a very delicate situation. It's like, it's not like I'm gonna be like, oh, she needs to forgive her dad. It's like, I don't know. That's a hard situation, whether or not you could really forgive someone for that situation. I mean, luckily her and her mom are still alive, but they could easily be dead. I mean, her mom is paralyzed, which, I mean, because of what April did, her mom is good now. I mean, she still needs a little practice to kind of get used to walking again, but hey, we do one step at a time, good or bad. When it comes to good or bad things, like, all we can do is wait for that next step to kind of show us where to go next. So, overall, a very, very good episode, and I'm very interested to see where the next episode will take us, with these interesting developments. I mean, I wonder, do the others know about the Cabinet of Soul now? Because obviously that was something only Mateo, obviously the governors, as well as, like, Quill now know, but the rest, like Tanya, April, and Ram, what will they do when they find out about this whole situation? It's like, oh wait, you were close to, like, wiping out, using your entire, speed, like your entire Rhodia, like, people to stop this threat, possibly, or wipe out the Shadowkin. Which, if he had wiped out the Shadowkin, that would have just made matters worse. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. Once again, he didn't know where he was going in that direction. Also, Dorothy ended up bringing up a very interesting thing. Like I said, I still have to comment on it every time because I can't remember if that's really her name or not. But nevertheless, she commented on the fact is that technically, each one of those things, like, wasn't probably an individual soul. That they probably all had one connected soul. So all Charlie would have had to do was sacrifice one soul and to use it. But then it's like, even Quill's like, okay, then you could have told us that, or at least told me ahead of time. Which is like, I guess more so than anything, she kind of brings it up is she wanted to see what kind of person Charlie was. And it's like, now we've got a better understanding of who he is. And obviously he's conflicted on which choice he would have to do, There's the choice he should make as a ruler, but then there's the choice he has to make as a person, just as Charlie, not Prince of the Rhodia, just Charlie, So, like I said, just have to wait and see where the next episode takes us, what comes about any of that. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.